Good evening. Tonight, in our second talk in the mission, we're going to talk about human weaknesses and guilts. So let me begin by asking you, suppose last night when you went home, you thought about it and you said, okay, no more guilt games in my marriage. I'm not going to play the silent treatment on my wife or my husband anymore. You know what our reaction is? If I can't play the silent treatment, what will I do when my husband hurts my feelings? You know why we play guilt games on one another? The silent treatment, the martyr trip, the pouting. That's our effort to control the other person. We make them feel guilty. It's conditional love. Now, suppose you decided after last night that occasionally I'm going to admit I'm wrong. Just occasionally. You know, what will happen if I admit I'm wrong? Do you ever watch husband and wives? Sometimes they fight for the last word. You know why people fight for the last word? Because as long as I'm right, I'm in control. If I'm wrong, I lose control. I know a lot of people that would rather be right and miserable than happy, than wrong and peaceful. So what I'm telling you is surrendering to unconditional love is giving up control. And you know, the amazing thing is, none of us ever in our lives have ever been able to control anybody into being who we want them to be. We're giving up control over what we don't have control over anyway. That's what spirituality is all about. It's giving up control over what we don't have control over anyway. It's as simple as that. But you know, we don't like to give up control. We don't know what's going to happen if we give up something. It's like me. About 5 years ago, I wasn't drinking, I wasn't smoking then, I wasn't eating sweets, and I thought I was going to die of boredom. I wanted to know, what else am I going to have to give up? And I went to my doctor, and I wanted to get some positive feedback, and I said, "Doctor, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't eat sweets, I don't have sex, I'm a celibate. Am I going to live to be 100? And he looked at me and he said, "No, Tom, but it's sure going to seem like it." I want to stress, though, what we talk about in spirituality is giving up control. And I'd like to begin tonight with guilts about the past. Giving up the guilts about the past. I really believe that's the entranceway to the spiritual life. As long as we have guilts about the past that we bury deep inside of ourselves, we'll never grow spiritually. So I'm going to try an experiment tonight before I begin. I'd like each one of you, just for a moment, to think of that time in your life when you were in the most pain, when you really felt you were most unlike yourself, the time when you really experienced your brokenness in its deepest level. Just reflect on it for just a moment. Picture it in your mind. Feel your feelings. Get in touch with it. Just spend a few moments in that silent reflection. Now I ask you, when you were thinking about it and reflecting on it, were you filled with gratitude or were you filled with guilt and shame? Because that's going to indicate to you whether you buried your past deep inside of you or whether you've grown from it. How many things in your life, people, places, and things that you don't ever want to think about? Because when you think about it, you get a guilt ache. Because what that indicates that you've buried it deep inside of you. You know what happens to us human beings as we get older? Either we're becoming more compassionate and forgiving and caring people, or we're becoming more critical and negative. One or the other will happen to us. And it all depends upon whether we've buried our guilts or whether we've grown from them or not. So what I'd like you to get in touch with is, what kind of guilts do you have inside of you? You know a way you could tell that you have a lot of guilts inside? If you're afraid to be alone with yourself. You know, I was that way for years. The first thing I ever did when I walked in a room was turn the television on. When I got in the car, I turned the radio on. When I was around the house and nothing was happening, I got on the telephone. I was afraid of being alone with myself. I know so many people, they'll do anything in the world but face their own aloneness. They'll go on all kinds of trips. They'll surround themselves with people. They'll work countless hours. And you know the reason? Because a person has buried so much guilt inside of them that they can't be with themselves. I talk about the little black book. What kind of a black book do you have on yourself? You know, we human beings, we're kind of strange. When something goes wrong in our life, two things happen at the same time. We usually think it's our fault, and at the same time we have to blame somebody. And you know, any time a problem comes into our life that we don't grow from, we write it in our little black book. It happens in our relationships. If we keep a black book on ourselves, we keep it on the people we love. In a marriage, whenever a problem comes into a marriage and the couple doesn't grow from it, each person writes it in their little black book. Black books create eggshells. And then they have a fight and they remember what happened 10 years ago. They just read from their little black book. You know, they say it starts in our childhood. You know the first thing the parents do when they get a divorce? They always explain to their children that it wasn't the children's fault. You know why? Because usually the children think it's their fault. I remember when I grew up, the many times my parents would argue, especially when they'd argue over me, and I always thought it was my fault. Especially when my mom and dad would have a fight, my mom would come out and she'd look at me and she'd say, "You're just like your father." Just think in your life, the broken relationships, the failures, the disappointments, sometimes the tragedies. What kind of a black book do you have on yourself? You know how I can tell with a lot of Catholics? When their children don't go to church anymore or get a divorce, you know the first thing the parents say? Where did I go wrong? Where did I go wrong? Do you have a black book the size of New York City or Gila Bend? I'm going to say two things to you now, and I hope you can hear me with your hearts. I think they're crucial if you're going to grow spiritually. The first is this. I've tried harder than anybody that I've ever known to rescue other people. I spent my whole life trying to do it for other people, and I've never been successful. You know what I've come to realize? The only person that I'm responsible for in my life is myself. I am the only person I have to answer for. You know what I tell parents when they bring their little children to be baptized? Your children are only guests in your home. Each one of them has to go out on their own journey. They've got to discover it for themselves. You can't do it for them. Just reflect. In your own life, when you reach the crossroads of your life, was there anybody there to do it for you? And I guarantee you, if you can ever learn that truth in your heart, that the only person that you're really responsible for is yourself, I guarantee you about 10 extra years of life. How much do you have written in your black book because you couldn't do it for your children or the people you loved? That's the first truth. The second is this. When you look in the mirror, what do you see? your preciousness or your warts? You know, I have some people, they come to confession and they go through the laundry list, and I think it's Al Capone on the other side. And I always ask them, have you tried to be the best person that you could be in your life? And you know, most people tell me, yes, Father, it hasn't been perfect, but I've tried awful hard. Have you ever given yourself credit for how hard you've tried to be a good person in your life? You see, so many of us, we grew up in what I call silent praise. You know what silent praise is? It's when our parents, when they don't tell us when we do it right, but they tell us when we do it wrong. I can remember I used to bring 5 A's home in my report card, and my dad would look at it and say, why didn't you get 6? I can remember when I played football. I hated the practices, loved the games, but the worst was the postmortems when my father sat down with me and told me how I always could do it better. You know how that comes across? I see it in so many people. Even when they compliment themselves, they always have to put a hook in there. Have you ever given yourself credit of how hard you've tried to be good in your life? You know how you can tell when you're growing spiritually? And really listen to this, because it seems so strange, but it's so true. You really know you're growing spiritually when you can go up to the people you love and you can look them in the eye, and instead of saying, boy, am I lucky to know you, you can tell them, boy, you're lucky to know me. I really mean that. You see, God lives in us. We're precious because of that love that's in us, and we have to feel precious about ourselves. A person that's spiritual has to feel special. I remember when I grew up, my dad, you know, he's part of the older generation, but he put down underneath his mirror, I'm the problem. And I put underneath my mirror, I'm precious. And finally one day, I went to my dad and I said, Dad, all my life I thought I was the problem. I don't have to remind myself of that. As parents, have you ever given yourself credit for how hard you've tried to be a good parent? Or all do you see when you look at your role as a parent, your mistakes? You know, there are no parents that could have prepared their children for the modern world. Have you given yourself credit for how hard you tried to be a good parent? In your marriages, even if they didn't work out, have you ever given yourself credit for how hard you tried to be a good wife or a good husband? I think that's crucial. You know what I decided? If I ever knew anybody in my life who tried as hard as I have to be good, to be the best person I could be, I'd really respect and love that person. And I decided to do that for myself. I'll give you a little test to see how it's working in your life. I'd like you just for a moment to think of the person in your life who's tried to own you the most. The person that's put the most conditions on you. I'm sure we've all had that experience at some time in our lives. We've had to fear the icy silence and the strained voice. We've had to walk on eggshells. Maybe we even had to tell lies just to keep the peace. Just think of that experience. How you felt in that relationship. Now, I'd like you to think of the person in your life who has accepted you the most. The person you most loved to be around because you loved the person you were when you were with them. It was so easy to be with them. You felt so safe. It was so easy to tell the truth. Think of those two experiences. The person that's put the most conditions on you and the person that's just accepted you the way you are. Now, let me ask the $64,000 question. Which one of those two are you to yourself? Are you your own best friend? Are you patient and compassionate and forgiving? When the world's going screwy around you, do you make it easier on yourself? Or are you your own worst enemy? Are you harder on yourself than anyone else? Are you your most severe critic? Do you demand perfection out of yourself? Listen to this. Do you get mad at yourself when you fail, even though in your heart you've known you've done your best? Are you your own best friend or your own worst enemy? Because this is the point. When I asked you to reflect on how you felt around the person that's tried to own you the most, or how you felt around the person that accepted you the most, you're going to have one or other feeling inside of you, depending upon whether you're your own best friend or your own worst enemy. And you know what's so sad? When Jesus gave us the hardest of all commandments, forgive your enemies, so many of us, we are the enemy. That's so crucial. Well, let me take it a step further. I'm going to need to wipe off the brow a little bit tonight. For many years, I preached about a God of love, a God of forgiveness. And I used to preach some pretty good sermons. In fact, people would come to me and say, "Father, you've been so helpful." But there was only one problem. Whenever I went back into the sacristy, I was filled with guilt. I preached the God of love, but a God of punishment was living in my heart. You know how you can tell what God you have inside of you? When you do something wrong, do you always punish yourself? Do you hang your head? Do you want to run and hide? Do you feel filled with guilt? If that's true, that means there's a God of punishment in your heart. Or when you do something wrong, do you see it as an opportunity to grow? Because if that's your attitude, you have a God of love inside. See, I preached the God of love, but a God of punishment lived inside of me. I always had to punish myself. I could never do any growing because I was too busy punishing. And I understand now why. Psychologists tell us that in the first 6 years of our life, that our basic personality is formed. Well, you know, the God that I was given in my first 6 years, it was a God of punishment. Believe it or not, when I was a child, I was taught that a man could live a perfectly good life, be a wonderful husband, a wonderful father. He could go to church every day. He could give to the poor. He could live 80 years and commit one sin against chastity and go to hell for all eternity. Believe it or not, I was taught you could go to hell for missing Mass once on Sunday or eating meat on Friday. Imagine what that does to a child. I had a God that was a policeman. He'd hide behind the pillar and he'd give me a ticket if I went 1 mile over the speed limit. See, I never knew how strong that training was, that I had a God of punishment that lived inside of me. Well, you know what happened? One day, I decided to become an adult. I fired the God of punishment. And I made a decision to believe in the God of the good news of Jesus Christ, that my God isn't there to punish me, my God is there to help me grow. I made that decision. You see, faith is a decision. It's not a feeling. You know, some people, they come to me and they say, "Father, I wish I could do it in my life. I wish I could get rid of this punishing God." But you know what I think? I think they're waiting for visions or angels to come down from on high or burning bushes. It's the most important decision that any of you will ever make in your life, is whether you believe there's a God of love inside of you or a God of punishment. And how you decide that is going to determine the type of life that you live. It's a decision. See, what I believe is all of us, we do some good things, we do some bad things. Good things happen to us and bad things happen to us. But you know what makes us good or bad? It's whether we grow from them or not. See, I look back at my life and I've been through almost every kind of pain a human being can be through. But I'm grateful for it, because that's how I found the real person that I am. That's how I found my God. So I'm grateful for my brokenness. Besides, you know, if I had my whole life together tonight, what would I do the rest of my life? See, life is a journey. We got to keep growing from what happens to us. And God is within us to help us grow. But you know what happens? So many people, they spend their life punishing themselves, and so they never grow. And let me take it a step further. You know, how do you accept or like yourself being a human being? You think it'd be easy, but it's really hard. You know what people tell me when I give the parish mission that I remind them of? An unmade bed. You know who they say I remind them of? Columbo. I've never had anybody tell me that I remind them of Robert Redford. But you know what they're communicating to me? It's my humanness. People can identify with me as a human being. It's the greatest gift that I have to share with you is the person I am. Warts and all. I'll put up my human weaknesses against any of yours. I'm a compulsive person. I've never done anything in my life moderately. Even when I was a little kid and we used to collect bees in the neighborhood, I couldn't go to bed at night until I thought I had every bee in the neighborhood in my jars. I used to collect baseball cards. I think I broke my parents buying the gum so I could have every baseball card there was. I'm a closet sweet eater. You know, I can go from 170 pounds to 220 pounds and nobody will see me eating. Must be my glands. You know, I go around to a rectory and the cook will work all day on a beautiful cake or a pie and she'll bring it in to me and I'll say, no thanks, not tonight, too many calories. But when everybody's asleep, I'm like Sherman's March through the South. You know, when I was at St. Francis in Phoenix, you know when I used to visit people? During their dessert hours. And if I didn't get enough, I'd stop and get a pint of Baskin-Robbins on the way home. I've been through trail mix, fruit. The only thing that ever worked was strawberries. You don't gain a lot of weight with strawberries. In fact, one time I was addicted to dried fruit. I had to eat a whole bag of dried fruit every day. Until one night I ate a whole bag of dried figs. I've never eaten another one. But this is me, the human being that's talking to you. You know, I'm a 49er addict. I come from San Francisco. I've never enjoyed a 49er game in my life. It's always a matter of life and death. In fact, when football season is over, I go through football withdrawals. I'll give you an image. If you want to know the Tom Allender that's talking to you, get this picture. Vice principal of a high school in charge of discipline for 600 boys. We're playing the championship basketball game, behind by 1 point. 20 seconds left. We take the ball out. We get our play. Then we work the play and we score just as the buzzer goes off. The referee called charging. You know where I was? In the middle of the floor with my hands around the throat of the referee. That's me. When I was in Phoenix here, I was like Superman flying over Phoenix looking for losers. See, I had that need to be needed, and as soon as I saw a loser, I'd swoop down to save him. Impatience. If you want to see me a crazy man, just watch me at a supermarket when I have one item and I'm in an express lane and the person in front of me has 20 and they need a check verified. Impatience. I hate to wait in lines. When I go to an airport, I think everybody's taking an hour in front of me. Fast feet. I'm an over-promiser, under-producer. I'm a people pleaser. I always have to say yes, and so you know where the fast feet come from? I'm always running around trying to keep everybody happy. In fact, my mom one time, you know, she named a bird after me. And I thought that was a compliment until I went home. You know what kind of a bird it was? A hummingbird. Have you ever watched a little bit here, a little bit there? Back one time I went home and I saw this red stuff in the refrigerator and I thought it was cranberry juice, and I don't drink, I gulped it down. Hummingbird food. But this is me, the human being that you're looking at. And you know what? The greatest gift that I've given myself? I like myself the way God likes me. See, I don't worry about getting rid of character or flaws. I just want to get comfortable with them. I want to be comfortable with me the way I really am. And you know what I've really discovered about life? That when I'm human, when I'm vulnerable, people can love me. Because it's the real me. But you see, for years, I always, because I was so responsible, I never could show anybody I was hurting. I could never say I was lonely. I could never say I was afraid. I could never say I was angry. I always explained my feelings, always gave people a rationalization. Because I didn't think a responsible person could be that way. And you know what happened? Nobody loved me because nobody knew me. The greatest gift that I have to give you is my humanness, the real person that I am. And that's what people love about me. I'm human. I'll show you when I came to discover this. I had a big wedding in Santa Clara, the University of Santa Clara. And it was a very prominent wedding. People came from all over the country. We had opera singers, we had a quartet, we had doves, we had balloons. The couple's name was Mark and Julie. Don't forget that, Mark and Julie. Well, it came to the climax of the wedding. And the singers sang, the quartet played, the birds flew, and I heard bells in the background. And I said, "Go forth, Mark and Gloria." Well, I want to show you something. You know what my reaction was? It was to run and hide. You see, when I felt ashamed of myself, I thought everybody else was ashamed of me. And what I always did when I felt that way was to go and run and hide from people. Well, you know what I did? Since I've gotten to become a friend of myself, I love to talk to myself out loud. Because I like to talk to my friend. And I was walking back to the sacristy and I said, "Hey, Tom, you did the best job you could. You didn't mean to foul it up. Go to the reception." Well, I went to the reception. And you know something? People loved the wedding. Oh, they made fun and joked about it. But you know what happened? It made them feel closer to me because they'd all done things like that in their life. They didn't see me as a priest from a pulpit speaking down to them, but a human being just like they were. It's the greatest gift that we can give to one another, the real person that we are. And we can never share it with one another unless we like ourselves the way God likes us. The greatest gift that I've given myself is I've allowed myself to be human. In fact, I've given myself 3 very special gifts. The first is this: I gave myself the right to be wrong. And I had to work at that. I had to practice the sentence, "I am wrong," in front of the mirror. It didn't come out naturally. And it's amazing. You know, when I go to people and they're used to me blaming others or making excuses or rationalizing it, and I say to them, "Gee, I was wrong," they look at me. They don't know what to say. If a baseball player gets a hit 50% of the time, he's going in the Hall of Fame. If I'm right 50% of the time, they ought to put me in the Hall of Fame. What's the big deal about being right? When I can admit I'm wrong, it's a commitment to grow. You see, in my life today, it's not who's right that's important, but what's right. That we love each other. We take turns being right. I just think to myself that all those times when I always had to be right, I put the pressure on myself to be perfect. Another gift that I've given myself, today I can say I've changed my mind. And that's really important for a people pleaser. Do you know, one Christmas here in Phoenix, I said yes to 5 different Christmas dinners. And I went to every one of them. And each one of them thought it was the only dinner I was eating that day. See, that's the problem with a people pleaser. I say yes, I never learned the word no. And so I get back to my room and I wonder, how can I be 3 places at the same time? I could tell you horror stories of things I've done in my life because I said I'd do them. You know what I can do today? I can get on the phone and I can call somebody and say, Hey, I prayed about it. I thought about it. I've changed my mind. I allow myself to be human. I'm not perfect. The third gift that I've given myself is today I can say I don't know. And that's really hard for a Jesuit. We've been so educated. And you know why that's important? Because I know a lot less than I did 20 years ago when I thought I had all the answers. Today I'm happy if I can ask the right question. My world's getting a lot more gray than it used to be, all so black and white. But what a burden I put on myself when I always had to be right. So what I'm telling you is one of the greatest gifts that you can ever give yourself is to embrace your own humanness, because it's the greatest gift you have to share with other people. And you see that problem when we try to be perfect and we present this persona. No one can love us because we're not real. Let me tie all this together tonight. And what I have to say is based on two principles. The first is this: a friend is someone I can trust with my weaknesses. The greatest gifts that God has given me are my friends. They've taught me more about God's love than any Bible or any sermon or any course I've ever taken. My friends are God's greatest gift to me. I love to be around them because I love being myself. Now, many of you are married, and I ask you, is your marriage a friendship relationship, or is it an eggshell relationship? Can you trust your weaknesses to each other? Many of you come from families, your parents or your children. Is your family a friendship relationship where you can trust your weaknesses to each other? Or do you walk around each other on eggshells? Just think for a minute. Your significant relationships of your life, are they friendship relationships or eggshell relationships? That's the first point. The second is this: the worst thing that anybody can do to me that loves me is when I've injured them, and I injure all the people I love regularly. I'm late, I'm thoughtless, I'm selfish. You know why? Because I'm human. I'm not perfect. I hurt all the people I love regularly. And when I hurt somebody I love, I always feel terrible. I've never enjoyed hurting somebody I love in my life. I feel terrible. But when that person that I've hurt, when they come along and make me feel more guilty than the guilt I already feel, I usually let out on them all the angers I feel towards myself. The worst thing that anybody can do to me is when I've injured them, is to take it personally because I'm not perfect, to punish me because I'm not perfect. It's the worst thing that anybody can do to me. But you know how most of us have been conditioned? When somebody injures us, we play that old eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I don't think there's anything more insane than for a husband and wife or a family to walk around the house and pretend like each other doesn't exist, both perfectly miserable. It's the height of insanity. Or the martyr trip. After everything I've done for you, after all I've given you, how can you treat me this way? Or the pouting. Or men, they love to get in an argument with their wife and they'll slam the door and go out and have a beer or two, and they'll let their wife stew in her own guilt. Guilt games are the cancer of love. Every time I play them on someone I love, I'm destroying what I want the most. Because when enough guilt games have been played, the relationship is over. And that's true whether it's husband and wife, parents and children, friend and friend. Guilt games are the cancer of love, because eventually a person will not trust us again with their weaknesses. We've crossed that line of no return. So now let me show you, or put this talk together. If I injure you, you're going to be either there to punish me or to help me grow from it. And it's all going to depend upon the God you've chosen to believe in. If in your personal life, when you fail, You always punish yourself. Then when I injure you, you're going to be right there to punish me. All of our relationships are mirrors of our own relationship with ourselves and our God. But if you've chosen to believe in a God of love, that when weakness comes into your life, you see it as an opportunity to grow, then when I injure you, you're going to be right there to help me grow from it. All of our relationships are mirrors of our own relationship with ourselves and our God. That's why I'm telling you, my brothers and sisters, that's the most important decision you'll ever make in your life, because that will determine whether you'll ever be able to find true human intimacy, unconditional love in your life, or whether you'll go through your life without ever finding it. It all depends upon the God that you've chosen to believe in. That's why Jesus came, for the forgiveness of sins, so that we could accept ourselves and grow and move on and give that gift away. And that's what the Christian community is all about. People who love each other without conditions. But we can't give it away if we don't first have it within ourselves. I think of the beautiful experience of a husband who's maybe he's been working long hours, he's been selfish, he's been thoughtless. And he comes home to his wife, and he expects the icy silence and the strained voice. But instead, he finds his wife is there to help him grow from it. My God, I just didn't marry my wife, I married my friend, someone I can trust with my weaknesses. Or children, when they go out to make their mistakes and go through their growing process, they come home expecting the lectures and the sermons. And instead, they find their parents are there to help them grow from it. My parents aren't just my parents, but they're my friends. They're people I can trust my weaknesses to. That's the miracle of love. But it can never happen in our lives until we choose to believe in a God of love for ourselves. And that's the good news of Jesus Christ. The most important decision that you'll ever make. And I'd ask you tonight, on our second day of the parish mission, to really spend some time in reflection and look into your life and ask yourself, when weakness comes into my life, do I punish myself, or do I see it as an opportunity to grow? Really look and see what kind of a God you have in your heart. And remember that your decision is a decision, it's not a feeling. Each of you has to decide as an adult the God that's going to live within you. A God of love or a God of punishment. And my real prayer, because you're a wonderful parish here, wonderful people, the greatest prayer I could have is that each one of us in this church tonight, we can all choose in a God of love, and just think what a difference that'll make in Phoenix and the world around us. May each of you find the God of love.